This was a super fun podcast to record. Uh, Lisa-Maree knows a ton about HR, people operations, all that stuff. She's had a wide array of experiences running from small startups to really big companies. Her focus right now is more in the mid-market. And I think we might do another one only talking about power tools because both of us like DIY stuff. Here's a fun conversation with Lisa-Maree. Thank you. You made it. We made it.
Hello,
It
we
worked.
made it.
I'm sorry. I thought I had the Zoom link in the invite.
Oh, it's okay. I just saw my phone number and was like, I don't think that's what he was hoping for. So
No. I wanted your background. That was the whole thing.
the background. Yeah. No, this is actually just what my wall looks like. It's not
Very cool. That
full
is
of,
actually what my wall looks like.
yeah, it looks amazing.
I'm,
I
I'm not super artistic, so I just was like, yeah, I like that picture frame, and it comes from an old house that we redid.
I love it. It's
Pictures of
perfect.
my kids. I'm like, what the heck,
That's amazing.
It's
Yeah, it's
the
perfect.
I'm being authentic. I think that's the right way to put it.
Yes, I am being, let's make it look a little less chaotic. This particular room is our office, and I love like the DIY stuff. And so I've been redoing this room incrementally. So it's in a stage. It's not background worthy, so we're just gonna have this.
If it's any consolation,
Yeah.
um, we've been building a tiny cabin,
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you
total
told
side
me.
project, right?
Yeah.
Um, and we actually
Is
this
that
week we were
Grass
up there,
Valley?
Garden Valley,
Garden Valley. Okay. Yeah.
south of Grass Valley. Yeah.
Right.
We actually got it to the stage where we could sleep in it this week.
That's a
Woohoo!
big day.
Big day, right.
Yeah.
And now, granted, when we were in there Tuesday night, we didn't have the door up yet, so I just had a
Oh,
sheet of plywood that I just bungeed into the doorway, and that
perfect.
was that was it, right? I'm like, okay, and no insulation. So when we woke up in the morning,
Oh
it
no.
was
Freezing?
literally freezing. Yeah,
Literally freezing.
yeah,
That
yeah. It was
you
fun.
are you have thicker skin than I do. That would have been you would have heard a lot of I guess the right word is whining for me, I
Yeah.
think.
Well,
Yeah.
it's we've been in a tent. Every time we go up there, we've been in a tent.
Oh, oh, so
So
this is
this is an
like
upgrade,
upgrade.
huge
Yeah.
upgrade. Yeah,
Okay. And
yeah.
there's no door, but is there like electricity?
Oh no,
Oh no.
no,
Okay.
no. This is going to be a long term. Like I'm going to be working on that place
Perfect.
even after I move there. For a long
I,
time.
I
It
love
was
a good project.
Yeah. It's we bought it to build a regenerative farm,
Okay.
and it was just a piece of land
Okay.
with a very old barn
Okay.
and nothing else. No electricity, no water, no address.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this is a project.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. So
Yeah.
and we're learning as we go along. So
Sure.
we put a well in,
Exciting.
and
It's
the
a big
well lets
project.
us get an address.
Is that the qualifier?
It is, which I did not know beforehand. Like the well guy
No.
actually clued us into this. He was like,
Wow.
because when I contacted, I'm like, look, here's the landmarks to look for,
Hmm.
and he goes, oh, I know your barn. I drive by your barn all the time, and I'm like, okay, great, awesome, glad to know
Great.
that. And
Yes.
then he was asking about, what's the address, and I said, I don't have one yet.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, well, here's the deal. If you have a well, they have to give you an address. And I
Nice.
said, well, thank you so much. Like
Solid info.
bonus. And
Yeah.
he's right. I went to the county and said, here's the parcel number,
Yeah.
and I've got a well. And they said, oh, well, you need an address.
Hmm.
I
Yes, I
said,
do.
thank you.
That would be very helpful.
Because PG&E won't come out if you don't have an address.
Right.
Right. So little like catch 22-ish kind of a thing there, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And so once I got the address, I was able to go to the project manager and say, I have an address now. And he said, congratulations, you can fill out the form.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, that's so cool. I'm so happy. So anyway,
I love checking things off the list, especially
yeah,
when you kind of get the inside track. Oh,
yeah.
so
So,
good.
yeah, so we're working on it. Next up for the
Awesome.
tiny house is going to be a wood burning stove.
Heat is important.
Heat's important. And
Hmm.
yeah, so once we put that in, we'll then I have
Well,
fencing.
and a door.
Oh, we put the door in. Yeah. So
Okay.
the door went in on Wednesday. We got that
Okay.
installed, and it has a real like door latch and a key and
Oh,
everything. You know,
magic.
um, that was my second building a door from scratch.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
That's
and
cool.
yeah, it
I,
was
I
fun.
went into like a rabbit hole recently because our front door at our cabin I really want it to be a Dutch door. And there's no like overhang, the Dutch door where like the top and the bottom half of the door can open independently.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so I really wanted that on this, but there's no overhang. And so like water and there's all these issues. But I was watching these videos of people who were like, screw it, just make your own and like cutting it. And I'm like, I don't know. So we'll have to see. I might get a wild hair.
It's not that hard.
We have a steel door there now, which cutting through like that wouldn't be great. I'd have
Oh,
to put like and then if you're going to put a different door in, might as well just get the right door. But I'm kind of want to try it myself. But
you can, yeah, the building of the door isn't nearly as hard to do
okay.
as
The
one would,
hanging.
as even the hanging's not even that hard.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's
Your cat wants to be
I
on
know
the
the cat's,
podcast.
he does, yeah, he's totally
He
like,
wants to join. He has a
he's
feedback
like,
on the door.
I want lunch. He
Yeah.
just had lunch. He just ate lunch, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I know, but I'm hungry, so I'm gonna
And
whine.
you work for
Sorry.
me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the door's actually quite easy. Really,
Okay.
in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
Um, we did ours with a sheet of, the outside of it is it's paneling, it's exterior paneling, wood
Oh,
paneling,
okay. Yeah.
that's built kind of like plywood,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's, I want to say it's half-inch thick plus or minus a 16th.
Okay.
So it's got rigidity.
Right.
I put cross pieces where the hinges come in, so I
Yeah.
can put long screws through the
Yeah.
hinges into a 2x4.
Good.
Right, so I got
Yeah.
two 2x4s, one for each hinge.
Right.
The hinges are 20 inches down from the top and 20 inches up from the bottom. You
Okay.
need 4 hinges
Okay.
because you got those 2 parts, right?
That's yeah.
Right. And
Right.
then on the door latch, on the doorknob side, we put in a 2x6 that
Okay.
runs long enough that, because you need the doorknob is set back. I like the doorknob
Mhm.
set back from the door jamb.
Okay.
Personal architecture.
Aesthetically.
I like
Yeah.
that look, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So a 2x6 gives me plenty of space.
Right. Okay.
Number one. Plus,
Mhm.
I put it in tall enough that if I decide down the road I want to put a deadbolt in also,
Oh,
I've
sure.
already got the space, right? I've already got
That's
the
smart.
infrastructure.
Yeah.
Um,
And you just have to cut into it.
and then we got the little, you can buy this tool at Home Depot. It's a template thing
Okay.
that does all the holes in the for the door, for the lock to go in.
Oh,
Right?
okay.
Yeah,
And you
so
found that to be like pretty easy? Or wasn't?
it was super easy to actually.
Oh.
My girlfriend did all the power tools on it.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Oh,
I just
girl.
was like, here's what you do. And she was like, okay, boink. I'm
Yeah.
like, here's the
Get
next
out of my
one.
way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, how's this template get set up?
Yeah.
She did all of it. And I was just like, here's the next step, here's the next step, here's the next step.
Awesome.
And it worked great.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad it's all coming together.
Yeah. So am I. That was awesome. But let's talk about leadership.
Or we can just let's turn this into a DIY podcast.
The DIY podcast, right? Hi, welcome 40% Better, the DIY edition.
Making your house 40% better.
Exactly. What else do you want to do on your house?
Oh my God, I have such a list. But yes, we could have a whole conversation on that. Yeah.
I'll have to figure out if there's a way to like, so how do you put DIY into a leadership context and have it make sense to the audience?
Here's what I would say on that. I think as a parent, especially a female parent, if you are picking up power tools and you're getting shit done, you are teaching your kids to do stuff on their own.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been really fun teaching our 13-year-old daughter to work with power tools. She's like, I didn't know I could do this. I'm like, you can do all of these things.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing anybody runs into sooner or later is who can lift the heavier stuff, you know?
Yep. That's right.
Yeah.
And money. You just need the money to be able to do all these things. And so there's some obstacles, but
yeah,
obstacles can be overcome.
Yeah. And you can always be creative about materials.
Mm-hmm.
You can always be creative about materials.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
So let's segue pivot into the real leadership thing.
Great.
I'm gonna so after we're all done, I'm gonna record standalone an intro.
Okay.
For this, because usually I don't have an idea for the intro until after everything's done, and then I'm like, okay, perfect. Yeah, now I know what I'm going to say, and I'll do it.
Sounds great.
The question that I always ask everybody is like, what's your origin story? how did you start thinking about and go down the road of, oh, I have an approach and a system and a perspective, and that'll help other people with leadership?
Mm-hmm. Leadership as a concept, or like what I have done and the like how I got to make the decisions to execute on some of the things that I was doing. Or does it matter?
Um, I think pragmatic first,
Okay.
and then what kind of mental models have arisen out of that?
Okay.
Or if the mental models came first, then what's the pragmatic that came out of that? Right?
Mm,
Because some people, they're doing things and they don't realize, oh, this really works, but like they have unconscious competency,
hmm
right? I've
Right.
worked for a few of those people
Mhm.
where they're amazing leaders, but if you ask them like, how do people replicate this? They're like, I have no idea.
Right.
Or the opposite is people who start off with really good mental models that they know how to talk about.
Mm, okay. Origin story. Let's
There's
see,
no wrong
question.
answer here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see how it goes.
Okay.
You might have
Cool.
to edit some stuff.
Not a problem.
If I get flustered, I'll just start talking about power tools.
Okay. Okay. Cool. What brand?
Oh, I had a lot of Ryobi just because it's easy, but I don't necessarily believe those to be the best. It's just the most accessible, I think.
Okay.
DeWalt, it's another one, big one. I'm looking around because I'm literally surrounded by tools right now.
Oh, that's
So,
awesome.
yeah,
Very cool.
yeah.
So, origin story.
Are we recording?
Oh, we've been
You good?
recording.
Oh, as we just talked about doors and things.
Yeah, of course. Maybe I'll have what do you call it? A blooper reel.
Oh God, I can help with that. This will give some content for that,
Okay, great.
for
Great.
sure.
Okay. Awesome.
I think asking someone about their origin story is such broad and loaded, potentially loaded question. I think for me, I don't know if I can look back at any particular time or moment where I've been like, oh, this is either what I'm going to do or how I'm going to do it. I think in many cases, based off of what I do, which is HR, it's such a blend and an immediate blend of proactive and reactive at the same time. So I think that oftentimes that you're reacting to something, and then in the end, you're like, oh, that result, that is who I want to be, and that's how I want to show up. And taking those data points, um, implementing those in the future, but also using those as bite-sized pieces to train other people on.
Mhm.
A lot of trial and error. I mean, I've done a lot with like education piece and reading all the nerd books and all of that to try to glean information and insights. And I definitely have from people who are much smarter than I am. But I think a lot of it, like you can only implement those strategies in your life if you're running into those scenarios. So I think you really kind of find out who you are and learn from what you're able to do when you're placed in those situations. So I think when I'm working with kind of early managers and they're
Mhm.
looking for a blueprint on what exactly to do, it's like you gotta just jump in and try. And there's going to be people around you to help guide and advise, but like you got to jump in and figure out how you lead and how you react to things before really knowing kind of what your strategies are. And I think that's kind of been the way I've worked, good, bad, or ugly. That's just how I've found myself working. And I think in my background, as far as like how I got here, I wish I could say it was super strategic and planned out. People do have a plan for their life. And I think I definitely at times have had that plan. And now it's funny to look back and be like, oh, that was cute. Because it didn't happen that way at all. Even just starting Retain was it's just kind of happened in a way where I had people who were like, hey, can you help with our company on the HR side?
Mhm.
And in starting to do that, realizing that there was a huge market for it and just being open to those opportunities
Yep.
has really been helpful and kind of got me here in owning this and running this consulting firm.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's an awesome origin story.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, works great. Yeah. Yeah. And
Perfect.
I don't know that anybody looks back and goes, yeah, what I'm doing is exactly what I had planned out when I was 22.
I would love to meet someone who can actually confidently say that because I would have a million questions for them. Like how?
Um, I have only heard a couple of people say that that's what's going on
Okay.
with them. So one of them, and this is like super niche, right? So one of them is Shane Dorian.
Okay.
He's a pro surfer.
Yeah.
Um, and uh, and he actually was in an interview said, "Yeah, I'm doing what I expected. Like when I was 17, this is what I wanted to be doing, and I'm doing it, and life is great." Um, and
But like, okay, so that's where I would dig in even deeper. Like exactly as you had planned, because you have people who want to be a
right,
doctor from birth and then they are a doctor. It's like,
right,
okay, sure, you check that box, but like, is this exactly, are you living where you thought? Like, is all of this part of your plan? Everything? Because
right,
that's where things get crazy for me.
right, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you'll have to maybe I can get Shane to come on, and you can
Ah,
interview him on the podcast.
great.
Ask
So
him
many
those
questions.
questions. So many questions. Yeah, yeah.
Perfect.
Um, I have no angle for getting him on this podcast, so I don't really know how I could pull that one off. But I'll
You're all, hey, I know this HR person. She has a lot of questions for
yeah,
you.
right, exactly.
That'll be the draw.
Wouldn't you love to be grilled by somebody in HR? You'd be like,
Totally. That's everyone's dream.
yeah, does she know anything about bow hunting?
Mm, no,
That's gonna be yeah. That
not
um,
even a little.
you're gonna have to learn a little bit just because that's a thing for him.
Bow hunting.
Yeah, he's way into bow hunting.
Okay, add it to my list.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Things to learn.
Do you know who Cameron Haynes is? Oh, he's
I
another one. Cameron Haynes is doing exactly what he wants to be doing.
okay, and what does Cameron Haynes do?
So Cameron Haynes is a bow hunter.
Okay,
Another thing, right?
sure.
Sorry, those two things kind of click together. So Cam Haynes has been a bow hunter since his middle or late teens.
Wow, okay.
He's also an ultra marathoner. Um, but his training is so that he can go bow hunting because he figured out very early on that if he went deeper into the woods than anybody else,
Uh-huh.
nobody was hunting. And so he had all this stuff available. And so he was like, well, I got to be in shape because I got to go
Sure.
25 miles into the woods before I get to where I want to be. And I got to carry all my gear in, and then I got to carry the animal back out.
Oh my God. Yeah, this is so far removed from my day to day.
Yeah. So
I think it would be fascinating.
yeah. So Cam Haynes is the second one.
Okay.
It fits in there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Totally. We're totally off the topic here. This is too
it's
funny.
great. Blooper reel.
Um, the kinds of things that your clientele normally come to you with, like the
Mm,
struggles they're having. Do you have like a top 5 list?
gosh, it's so funny. I was talking to someone on my team about this and how drastically it's changed even in the last week, um, with a lot of change that's happening in our country. I think top up. I mean, there's a lot of like basic things that people have questions about, their benefits, their how payroll works depending on where they are. But I think as you get more senior in working with, more senior leaders, I think what I've found to be fairly consistent is everyone, even if they get a lot of feedback about being a great leader, they're always questioning whether or not that's true and how can I be better. I think there's a lot of second guessing a topic or a concept like leadership because it is so in the gray. It's not like if you're an accountant, can you do these, set of
Mhm.
tasks that makes you successful? You know what I mean? Not to make fun of accounting, but it's just that's very black and white.
Right.
Being a
Right.
solid leader is just it's a concept in many ways, right? And so there's so many different ways to do it. It's so personal to who the person is, especially if it's going to be authentic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we spend a lot of our time talking about these things with leaders. Sometimes we're seen as like very unqualified therapists for this, But I think being able to take that, not insecurity, but those questions and root them in actual scenarios that we see in
Mm-hmm.
them working with their team or feedback that their team has can help that leader feel more rooted in that. So I'd say that that's one side. I think we also spend a lot of time on kind of the compliance side, like
Mm-hmm.
as a company, as a leader, what are the things I'm required to do? even in day-to-day conversations, like someone came to me with this, I don't know the most appropriate way, or can I create risk by answering by X, Y, and Z? So we're constantly working with people to figure out ways to reduce risk for a business and for employees. And there's a lot of our headspace that's dedicated to that.
I'm just thinking, I've never had a conversation with an executive, and maybe this is because they're already pre-filtering,
Mm,
right?
hmm
Where oh, this is risky in some way, shape, or form, ever even came into
mm.
the conversation.
I
Um,
think when it comes to having a business with employees,
mhm,
everything's risky, right?
right.
You run the risk of even something that's like non not in the legal sphere, but like saying something that unintentionally hurt someone's feelings, right? Or whatever. Like
Hmm.
a lot of that you just don't even know. And so if you do that and there's unintended consequences of that, there are
Sure.
questions about like, okay, what did I say that caused this? How can I not do this in the future? Is this a me problem? Is it a they problem? Like there's a lot of those conversations that happen that kind of goes into the coaching space. But as far as risk is concerned on like the employment law side of things,
Hmm.
there are landmines everywhere. There just are. And it's just, it can be very, very difficult to run a business in general, but certainly with all the laws that are changing and how it can drastically impact a business. So um, I love working with the founders that acknowledge those, not the ones that are like super stressed out about them all the time, but acknowledge that that's true and want to have, be in partnership with us to be able to say, here are the things you need to worry about. Don't worry about these things. We got it. Right. And having those check-in points with them
Hmm.
to make sure that, they feel supported.
Okay, I have to ask this question because I'm super curious.
Okay.
What are the top, some number,
Okay.
small number, not a big number, of things that um, founders or company leadership um, don't know are landmines?
Oh, you want a small number?
Like three, the three
Yeah.
that come to your.
I think, gosh, that's such a good question. Like landmines. I think that so one thing that we see a lot of, and oftentimes it's super unintentional, is risk for discrimination, right? So it, one simple thing, and it's not really that simple, but an example that we had recently was a founder had created a parental leave policy. It was for a female on the team, white female on the team. It was the first person to need parental leave. They did that. And then, I don't know, it was like 8 months later, another person on the team, it was a minority female, wanted it, and they had to change the policy. So it wasn't as robust. And that was tied to business financial plans. They just couldn't afford to do the same thing. And yet, optically, it looks like that was discriminatory.
Right, right.
A lot of things that happen that are tied to the finances of the business or just the need to kind of change things um, can optically be discriminatory. And so I think things like that we need to make sure we're super aware of. And so we spend a lot of time working with founders to say, okay, we can absolutely do this, whatever your plan is, whatever the policy is. And yet we need to make sure that we're ready to implement this and have it be something that could set precedent moving forward.
Sure.
And try to walk them through like scenarios where it could go sideways. And a lot of times the people we're speaking with, the founders and the leaders, are like, I had no idea. That was never the intention. And yet
Hmm.
it's really tricky and could be incredibly costly to a business when they had the best of
Sure.
intentions.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Um, that's so interesting. Do you see problems more in um, tech focused companies than brick and mortar or like
Oh no.
manufacturing or?
Well, I think it's a different set of problems, right? I mean, if you're in tech and you look at something like injury and illness prevention, right?
Mhm.
We're going to get a lot of like ergonomic assessments and like disability things with carpal tunnel and whatever, but like those are fair, not that they're easy to solve for, but not as costly to a business. But if you're in manufacturing and someone gets
Right.
hurt, it's likely very hurt and drastic. And so the policies that we have to have for companies in like manufacturing are very different.
Right.
And total science story, I worked for a startup, and it was like your traditional startup. All the things you think of with a startup, this was that. And at one point they had had a Nerf gun fight, Nerf guns, the little foam.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
And someone had turned and the Nerf gun had scratched his eye and like did damage. And he had to go to the doctor and
Oh
needed,
no.
and I had to call this in because it's no shove thing, right? So you have to call it in. And they're like, the questions I got, because they just didn't understand what I was saying. They're like, so does the company manufacture ammunition? I'm like, we manufacture nothing. We're in online advertising. They're like, okay, so you manufacture guns. I'm like, no. It was the craziest set of questions to get to an injury from a toy from online. Like it was, but you have to submit those things. And it's just a very different set of problems. So I would say that we don't run into more problems in tech. It's just a very different set of problems, depending on the industry.
That's funny. Yeah, I've been in those Nerf gun fights at tech startups.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I never thought about safety glasses until you just now said that. I'm like, oh, I need to get
Yep.
hello, Amazon. What do you got in the way of safety glasses?
And then you're like, oh my gosh, are we really wearing safety glasses for a Nerf gun fight at work?
Exactly.
Like,
Right.
I
Right.
can't believe we're even having this conversation.
Right. Right. Oh,
Yeah.
that's too funny.
Uh-huh.
Well, maybe you have to get like creative and have funny looking safety goggles, like with
Mm,
feathers on them or something,
yeah. Or you
It's
just have people sign some sort of
some,
liability waiver that says if you're going to play with toys that are unrelated to the job, good
yeah,
luck with, I mean, that doesn't work, but it would be funny.
they have to use that conference room down the hall that's got padded walls
Hmm.
and no furniture.
Yeah. Go out on the sidewalk.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. That is so funny.
Uh-huh.
Wow. Huh. Now I feel like I need to go back and interview every CEO I've ever worked for to find out like whatever happened. Like,
Uh-huh.
has anything happened that I don't know about while I was there that I was totally blind to?
Yep.
Oh my God. Okay.
I'm sure they have a whole Rolodex of examples they could bring up.
Of stories. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Employee retention.
Mm. Hmm.
What are your thoughts? What are your perspectives? That seems to be a
Issue.
it's well, yeah, so it's interesting, right? Because I've been at some companies where everybody there has been there forever, air quotes around
Mm.
forever, but like
Yeah.
people that have been there for a dozen years, it's
Hmm.
not unusual and it's a tech company, right?
Hmm.
And then the other side is, companies where people that are there longer than a year and a half are old timers,
Right.
right? Except for the C-suite.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, the
and
founders.
yeah, and I look at those two ends of the spectrum and I'm like, okay, clearly the ones that have people there for a long time, those people have found their home,
Hmm.
right? But the ones where they've got a high churn rate, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, oh my God, that is expensive. Because finding talent is not like free. It's real dollars when you need to go
It's
hire
real
people.
dollars.
It's a lot of real dollars.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up. I mean, it's part of what um 11, which is a company that I'm a founder of, is building and focused on because turnover is so crazy.
Right.
Companies lose $9 trillion a year on turnover. If you replace someone, it's 2 to 3 times the salary in hiring, recruiting, onboarding, all of that. It's an emotional tax on the coworkers that are having to pick up the work and then hand it back and training other people. So it is detrimental. It can be really negative for business. It can be very costly. Um, I think something that we're seeing too, the trend has been in tech at least, someone stays with a company for 2.5 years and then they move. Part of that has been the cost of living and the cost of living increases don't align, right? And so if someone's getting a 3% year over year, it doesn't stay in line with how the actual cost of living has gone
Right,
up,
right.
inflation, all of that. And so if you can leave and get a 20% increase at another company, why not do that? So in fact, the newer generations coming into the workforce
Mhm.
or more interested in changing jobs quickly. And you'll see that they move up the chain much faster than someone who stays with the business, takes their 3%. And that's the example that a lot of people have had. And so I think unless a business is ready to adjust for that, they have to kind of anticipate the turnover. I mean, I think there's definitely strategies you can implement within a business.
Mhm.
And I think the thing that we've seen that's the most important is um, intentional communication. And I think in many ways that has even gone away. We've gotten a
Right.
lot of feedback from employees because I do a ton of exit interviews, right? Where people are like, I am not connected to my manager. I don't even know if they, care at all about what I'm doing or what my goals are. We haven't had a meaningful conversation. I don't even know how to like bring that up to them.
Ouch.
And it's, I think part of it is the tools that we have available. For example, and I'm not speaking negatively about Slack because I use it all day, every day. But some of these tools are designed for immediate response. They cause people anxiety. It's, if they get pinged at 2 a.m. just because someone's trying to get something off their plate, it wakes people up. They feel like they have to respond. But there's not like the time to process the information and intentionally respond. And I think people have just gotten away from that. The third being the push for the use of AI. So employees feeling like their resources are now robots. They don't feel
Mm.
valued
Yep,
in
yep.
that. And so I think the farther we come away from intentional human interaction, the more turnover there's going to continue to be. It's going to be like a very expensive learning lesson.
That is so interesting. One of the things that I get feedback on regularly is a
Mhm.
lack of um, documented process for getting
Mm,
promoted inside companies, which I think is a driver of churn.
sure.
Because I've had friends at companies who have complained that they want to get a promotion,
Mhm.
but they don't know what to do,
Right.
and that their boss, manager, whatever, whoever's above them in the org chart, can't give them guidance on that, which to me seems like a huge um, in my mind, that's part of what leadership's job
Mhm.
is to be able to give you that roadmap of here's what you need to
Mhm.
learn, demonstrate, excel, or at least be competent at to move up the ladder.
Right.
And um, I only like the example in my head of that, right? That's been super successful is the U.S. military. Like in the
Sure.
U.S. military, it's super clear what you have to do to get up, go up the ranks, right?
Yes.
Um, there is no mystery about that.
Mhm.
Um, and I've only so to date, and this like I've been asking this question for 20 years here in Silicon Valley.
Mhm.
Um, I've found two companies that
Okay.
actually have a syllabus for advancement.
Okay.
One of them is Deloitte,
Mhm.
um, and the other one is this small tech shop that that they're basically hired gun software developers,
Okay.
and one of the things they have is here's how you advance through the ranks. Here's all the
Mhm.
competencies. Here's what you have to do.
Mhm.
And they have that both for people who want to be move up as individual contributor kind of roles
Mhm.
and for leadership.
Right.
The problem for them is they're not growing that, so nobody chooses a leadership path
Mm.
because
Okay.
they even if they moved up, they wouldn't
Mhm.
have a team to run,
Right.
right? So it's a bit of a catch. You're like, oh, that doesn't do
Mhm.
me any good, right?
Right.
Um, unless you're thinking, oh, I'm going to learn these skills and then take them to a different organization.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
I think it's an interesting concept, and I think if you look at companies, you know, 10, 20 years ago, those plans were much more common, right?
mhm.
Certain industries, it is still common. teaching is one of them, those kind of things. Usually those that are like within the unionized workforce, first
Okay.
responders, they have a lot of those. I would argue, you brought up the military example, and I would say, yes, that's a really good example of when it goes well. And the one thing I would say is for business, for companies, smaller companies, you need people who can execute
Mhm.
and check all the boxes of their job description. And yet there's this whole management leadership piece that's hard to define on paper to figure out if someone would make a good manager, right? If someone's clicking all the boxes to get promoted, but the soft skills are
Mhm.
not great, it's
Right. Right.
very hard to then say, okay, I'm going to help coach you on those things, because some things people just don't have it, right? They're just poor communicators, and no matter how much you try to coach them, they're just poor communicators, and that makes for a really shitty manager, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I think companies found themselves in difficult situations where they had these, like the matrix that says if this then that,
Mhm.
and they were pointing to, employees are like, well, wait a second, you said if I hit these 10 things then I get promoted and I get X% more in salary. And so it's hard to write those soft skills into those and have them be measurable to a degree which you can truly evaluate and point to someone and say, this is actually you haven't hit this yet, for
Right.
some of those soft skills. And so I think companies have gotten away from that because it's created liability for them, right? If they don't promote, even though their matrix says that they should, an employee can put a claim in. So I think it's easier, safer, what's the right word?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it has been more of a strategy to remove those
Mhm.
from business, to give a little more flexibility on that coaching side and to make sure that they're promoting people that are able to do all the different pieces of it, and some of which are pretty hard to describe in a measurable way. You mentioned the military. The military has very different employment law. They have different methods by which they can course correct
Mhm.
for not hitting certain milestones, or you know speaking inappropriately or whatever. They can do different things. Not that any of us would want to participate in that type of path, but like it's just a different setup. It's hard to compare something like the military to a tech startup when they're just structured completely differently and run by different rules, if you will.
So here's a different perspective.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of my mentors ran supply chain in the
Hmm.
U.S. Air Force, right?
Okay.
Um, and he had this really insightful perspective that
Okay.
I've leveraged everywhere since then. That the only reason he was successful was because his teams were successful, and
Absolutely.
that his job, like, his teams moved things that weighed thousands of pounds,
Hmm.
none of which he could move by himself, right? Because it takes multiple people all
Sure.
doing different things to make stuff move around, right?
Right.
He said, my whole job is to make my team's life as easy as possible
Hmm.
and to remove the friction so that they can be successful.
That's right.
And so his teams operated really, really well.
Hmm.
And I heard that perspective and I thought, wow, that's really clever.
Hmm.
I really like that.
Hmm.
Um, and when I started running software teams, that was one of the first things I did, was figure out, okay, how do I remove friction from my team? How do I find it, first of all?
Right.
Um, and so I think it's easier than we recognize,
Hmm.
but most of us don't have, most people, like, I have a bunch of friends that are ex-military.
Okay.
Like, um, you get a different conversation with them
Hmm.
because, like, oh yeah, here's how we do blah blah blah, right? Like, whatever it happens to be.
Right.
um, and so I get, like, the insights that I've seen have been that if the leadership takes care of their team,
Hmm.
which you can do in a civilian environment as much as you can over there in the
Absolutely.
military, then you get great results.
Hmm.
um, and
I guess I was bringing that up more to say, like, specific to promotion. Um,
right, yeah,
because like removing roadblocks is one thing, but creating creating a role or promoting someone, especially if you're promoting them from individual contributor to manager, um, it just requires a certain set of skills. But in addition to that, it also requires a business need
sure, yeah, yeah.
for
In the
that
civilian world, you
manager.
totally, yeah,
Yeah.
1,000%. Yeah.
And we've run into that a lot where people are like, I deserve to be a manager. We're like, it's a team of 5. Who are you? What are you
Right.
managing? You
Right.
know?
Right.
And in which case, I think sometimes turnover in those particular cases isn't always bad, right?
Sure.
People
Yep.
get to a place where they've plateaued and want to do different things that the company just can't provide.
Mhm.
In which case, I think the best leaders are the ones that are like, how can I help you get to your next thing?
Yeah.
Assuming
Exactly.
that the employee had the like maturity to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's there's a whole different conversation about how do you systematize all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which I mean that's my whole thing is how do you systematize that kind of thing so you have
Right.
a consistent repeatable process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and make it so that anybody it's like math,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is it's a system, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I I don't know about the executive angle of this because I've always done first level team lead stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I see it and I've done it as here's the system,
Mm-hmm.
here's all the ingredients. I keep doing it over and over again. It keeps working really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, now I know how to teach other people how to do the exact same thing.
Right.
And the thing that's interesting, I haven't seen anybody break it down to the little tiny atomic levels like we did because I don't think most, like, I got lucky that I partnered with an occupational therapist
Mm-hmm.
who was able to help me see the little tiny atomic pieces of what I was doing
Mm-hmm.
and then go and data check that with my peers who said, oh, I can't do that, or I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to do that, or that's too emotionally uncomfortable.
Right.
And so then I was able to reverse engineer a system out of that.
Mm.
That's what we do at 40PP is we start teaching people that system.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a whole different conversation we can have. So I'm
I know,
curious
I think
your
it's
perspective
fascinating.
on it.
Like, well, because it's also like the way you look at things, like the lens that you look at things and the lens that I look at things, I think are so similar, but also in many ways kind of opposite.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so I think um that's why this is fun, is to have these
Yeah.
conversations, but
Yeah,
also
exactly.
like the benefit of people having resources that look at things through a different lens is it allows for different options and to make sure that people are incorporating all these different viewpoints, right?
Right.
Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's funny, interesting hearing how you kind of think about things, and I usually come in from the totally opposite side, and we might get to like the same midpoint maybe, but
Yeah.
it's just fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Awesome. Um, you mentioned risk a while ago.
Mm. Hmm.
Um, and I'm a huge fan of taking risks.
Sure.
Because it seems to me like that's where all the learning is.
Hmm.
And everything in business you do, like I've got this business idea, I want to go blah blah blah. Well, you're taking a risk,
That's a huge risk. Yeah,
right? No
totally.
matter what. Yeah, I had a call earlier this morning with somebody who took that risk, tried to get a business going, and it failed.
Happens.
It happens, right?
Yeah.
And they were like, but here's all the stuff that we learned,
Hmm.
right? And now the question is, okay, how can we apply that in the future, right? What's
Yeah.
what would we want to do next, with this kind of thing? When you're talking about risk with company founders, like how do you guardrail them?
Can you guardrail a
Well,
founder?
can you guardrail them? Right, right, right. Okay, so I have
Um,
an assumption that you can, but
yeah.
you
I mean,
know,
I think oftentimes you can kind of tell the background of a founder pretty easy without like cyber stalking them and finding out all their stuff beforehand. By the amount that they're receptive to even hearing about risk,
mm-hmm,
right? Early first time founders oftentimes are like, screw it, we're going to do it anyway, right? People who have done this before, people have been impacted by not having fully thought out kind of risk evaluation, and have kind of gone through it. Oftentimes, will be more interested in being like, let's talk through the options. Like, I'm still
mm-hmm,
wanting to take a leap. I want to try new stuff. I want to, all of that is so inspirational and so fun to be a part of. I think if there are guardrails, me partnering with someone, it's more to say like, and I say this a lot, like, yeah, knock yourself out. It's going to be great. There's going to be things that don't go well, but it's fine. Like we're going to learn from that. Your team's going to learn from that. Calculated risk, right? There are other things that I have just seen so much of in my career, on like the employment law side of things that are not worth the risk and is such an easy case to bring to against a company that can be so expensive and so dramatic and at very best a huge distraction can derail your ability to raise funds in the next round. Like it can just be so negative that's
Mhm.
where I come in hot at the beginning and just say like, hey, I get where you're trying to go with this. Here's what we should and shouldn't do with this. It's one of the reasons I love being a consultant, right? Is to be able to like use all of this experience that we have. We work with, hundreds of companies to be able to say like,
Mhm.
we've seen this happen. Here's some actual examples. Here's case law. Here's all these things. I want you to hear me. And yet, in the end, if this is really where you want to go and you've sat with advisors and talked to whoever, and you still
Mhm.
want to do it, in most cases, we're like, we'll help you with it, right? There's been very few times where we're like, we want nothing to do with this. But I just want them to be as educated as possible as to the risk so that they can
Mhm.
um, they can decide if it's worth it.
Can you give me a couple of examples?
I can give you a million examples
Okay.
about companies that about risk.
Well, of risk where you're like, it can be an expensive distraction, and but we're gonna, if you really want to go down that road, we'll help you with it. Like, because in my head, I'm thinking, I don't actually know what that is
Mm,
because I haven't ever had the conversation with somebody with an HR background to say, oh, we're thinking about doing this, and someone goes, oh no, that's a really bad idea. Like, and I don't know that I've ever, like, I have just, I've done lots of technology risky things, over the years,
yeah.
but I'm trying to think nothing that where, and granted, operating under the protection of an executive who is probably doing some kind of filtering to make sure
Mhm.
that I stay in the safe swim lane for HR. Um, but like, what's the risky stuff that I didn't know about?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for example, this is just one that we ran into today, is someone who is asking for a reasonable accommodation, right? So it's tied to a disability or something that's happened, injury, what have you. And they're saying, my doctor is saying I need this reasonable accommodation. Here's what I'm asking for. And the company just flat out saying, yeah, we're not going to do that.
Oh,
Why would we do that? Let's take a minute. We have to go
yeah,
through there's an actual documented legal process we have to go through to evaluate this. There's a specific response we have to do and try to find that's why they call it a reasonable accommodation. Like if it's reasonable,
yeah, it's
we should
reasonable.
do it, right?
Right, right,
I have seen some that are not reasonable. And so there's a process where you try to work with that person to find how we can get it to a reasonable place for the business and them. But I've had founders that are like, yeah, just tell them no. Like, oh, okay. Hold on. Hold on one second.
right,
That's great. Cool. But also, here's what will happen. Not can happen. Here's what will happen if you do it that way. It's just too easy of a claim. And also it's just really shitty business practice. Your employees are going to hear that this is the way you're treating someone.
right,
It gets out in the press. Like there's just so many things that are going to go wrong with this, but the legal
right,
case alone, like why are you choosing to do this? Um, Discrimination in terms of who we're laying off, right? If you don't take the time to do a full analysis of who's being laid off, what their circumstances are, tenure, all of those things, you're not going to be able to defend it. So we spend a lot of time hearing what a founder, like their ultimate goal is,
mm-hmm.
and trying to figure out kind of back into that in a way that's like, we can try, if your ultimate goal is to lay off 10% of the business, this initial list is a good starting point, but now we're going to take these steps and it's to make sure it's the most fair, most compliant process with the least amount of risk, but it's still hopefully, hitting the objective, right? Of you need to lay off 10%. let's just do it without the unnecessary risk or, even if it's unintended discrimination, right? So I spent a lot of my headspace in this world of trying to protect founders from themselves. And again, I want to stress that oftentimes, most of the time, it is totally unintended. And yet there's just so many, like I said, landmines. So like try to help.
Yeah. It's funny because, it's with that example, my knee-jerk reaction is I want to take care of my team. And
Mhm.
you need a whatever it is to be happy and productive for us.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm going to go figure out how to get the executives to pay for that. And I'd like, don't worry about it. Like, I
Mhm.
will figure out a way to make that happen, and you will have whatever it is you need, because in my world, I get more productivity out of my people because they're happy because we're taking care of them. And
Right.
that
Seems like.
such a smart business strategy.
Mhm.
And the executives I've worked for that take really good care of their teams, they had really, really high revenue per employee numbers,
Mhm.
which to me always matters. Like, what's this look like, and what's our average revenue per employee? How
Right.
productive are people being?
Mhm.
Um, how much do they like working here, and how much are they not churning out?
Mhm.
That seems like that's a happy employee kind of a statistic. To me, it just financially makes good sense. But
Yeah.
yeah,
You would think, but I think again, sometimes people um just aren't wired with that being their first thought,
right,
right?
right,
And so the people who are wired that that's the first thought, super easy for us to work with.
right,
Although
right,
sometimes when they're like, we're going to give everything to the team, you're like, hold on a second, let's
right, right.
think that
Yeah,
through. So that I think
yeah,
there's a spectrum, right? And so we
right.
try to pull people towards the middle as much as possible. Um, but a lot of times people who don't have people first and are wired that way start to get more wired that way or start to learn that as they have more experience and they learn more about like how um, their
Right,
decisions directly impact the team and that directs it's a snowball.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I it's interesting as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking to myself, man, I've been lucky to have some really, really good mentors over the
Mm-hmm.
years who took
Yeah.
really good care of their people.
Mm-hmm.
In, so the one in the military supply chain, another one ran a really high end restaurant.
Oh, wow.
And I worked there for a while, and
Okay.
everybody was they took amazingly good care of us,
Yeah.
and they made a fortune.
Sure.
Um, and yeah, that place was a cash cow.
Mm.
Um,
But you loved working there, right?
yeah,
Because you were you're part of something.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we knew that the management totally had our backs. Like
Mm-hmm.
their first thing was, we take great care of the employees take great care of the customers.
Right.
That was it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we took great care of the customers, and they took great care of us, and it was a virtuous cycle, right? It worked really,
Sure.
really well. Um, and then I worked at another company in the tech world years later, where the founders took really good care of us,
Mm-hmm.
and and I was it was the first real tech company that I worked at.
Mm-hmm.
And the next tech company that I worked at, I was like, wait, this leadership sucks.
Right.
What's the deal here? And then
Yeah.
I went to another company, it was even worse. And I was like,
Oh,
wait a minute.
yeah.
Like,
I didn't know how good I had it.
exactly. Like, holy
Yeah.
moly.
Right.
And yeah, that, there needs to be a book on, well, there are books. There's a bunch of books on
There's
leadership
infinity books.
that people don't adopt, which always blows my mind. Like, I don't get
I,
the
I
motivation that's missing.
I think sometimes I don't know if it's motivation or just um like I said, how you're wired, and not to excuse the behavior. But people come from all different backgrounds, experiences,
Mhm.
whatever. And so I think for some, it can be as easy as reading something or hearing something and implementing it and moving on, right? For other
Mhm.
people, they are fighting against a backstory
Right,
to
right.
try.
Yep.
And so I've seen that, with people where I'm like, how are they not like evolving? Like how are we
Right.
still having the same conversations? And then the more time we spend to start to kind of peel that back a little bit and understand some of those things, you're like, okay, this is a different scenario. So I try to look at that with, I'm not always great at it. Sometimes I am like, who the hell is this person? But, there are people that, I have to remind myself, like the approach here needs to be different. My approach needs to be different
Right.
because it's, for them, it's not as easy as just having me say, here's what's going to happen. I
Right.
have to have a different approach, and that can be really hard. But you're right. For the most part, it can be really frustrating to be like, there's tools available, like plug them in.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's what's the um there's an author who I'm paraphrasing. He said, "The future has arrived, but
Hmm.
it's not evenly distributed." And I think that's true for all knowledge. Is
Hmm.
it's here, but it's just not evenly distributed. And
Right.
I think I've been totally guilty of this. People have called it out that there's something that I know, and I just take for
Hmm.
granted that everybody knows it.
Hmm.
And then I get in a conversation with people, and they're like completely have no clue what I'm talking about, and I'm like, wait a minute, but
Right.
didn't you go to school?
Totally. And I think we're likely all guilty of that,
Oh
right? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I know there's things that, I mean, it sounds cocky, but I know that there's things that I know really, really well. And because
Mhm.
I'm a nerd about it and I, have studied so much of it and I do it day to day, sometimes I talk to people. It's funny when I talk to my parents sometimes about what I do. They both worked in the same companies for 30 years. My mom was a teacher, whatever. And so when I talk to them about what I do, I'm like, wait, so you don't know that any of this stuff happens. Got it. Okay. Give me a second. And obviously, when I talk to them about what they did, I'm like, wait, that happens? That's crazy. If I
Right.
met with your friend who's a bow hunter, I'd be like, what?
Yeah. Right.
And
Right.
I'm sure he's like, what do you mean you don't know how
Yeah.
this works? Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think that's what makes workplace or community in general so fun is you get the ability to, if you can have the patience for both yourself and others, um, there's these conversations are fascinating,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's what's possible.
totally.
Yeah. I'm always
Yeah.
thinking like, okay, what's possible?
Hmm.
What is and um, what is the fuel that we need
Yeah.
to get the machine to do this particular
Hmm.
thing? Like, what's going to have the people be super excited and
Right.
all going in the exact same direction, and and afterwards going like, oh, that was super fun.
Hmm.
Because for me, that's the win, right?
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
Good, bad, or indifferent. Mary Poppins made a big impact on me.
Okay.
For every job that must be done, there's an element of fun. Find the fun
Hmm.
and snap the job's a game, right?
Yeah.
Like one of my mottos. And
Yeah.
so I always think about like, okay, how do I make this entertaining and fun for my team?
Hmm.
What's going to help them be super happy as we're diving into this crunch time of
Yeah.
delivery that everybody around us thinks we can't do.
Hmm.
Like they're just like, you guys are going to fail miserably and you're all going to go up in smoke. We're going to fire the whole team, right? Like,
Right.
okay, you guys ready to play this game? And they're all like,
Yeah.
let's go. You
Hmm.
know, and I think it's the challenge. But like,
Yeah.
I like the challenge, and I think good, bad, or indifferent, the team buys into that,
Hmm.
right? And I'm sure they all like challenges too, right?
But I don't know, do you think that they're buying into it or is it just that they trust you? So, they trust you because you've done what you've needed to do to build that
Yeah.
trust,
Well,
right?
yeah, that's a big part because
Hmm.
I realize that a ton of the work that I do with
Yeah.
my team is about building up their psychological safety
Hmm.
to a really high level. And so for them, doing something that is vulnerable
Yeah.
is manageable and
Hmm.
it's completely not out of the ordinary,
Hmm.
but they wouldn't do it with somebody else because the prior leader didn't build the psychological safety,
Sure.
right? And this is, like you inherit a team
Hmm.
and then you make them operate a whole bunch better, and then people are like, wait a minute, what did you do?
Right.
And
Yeah.
and um, it's at the end of the day, I think being able to build psychological safety.
Hmm.
And you can't do it better than what, like the whole Kaizen, the Japanese Kaizen,
Hmm.
1% better every day, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that's as fast as you should ever want to go
Hmm.
because it's totally achievable and the whole team has to be together, right?
Right.
Because if one person feels super safe and nobody else does, it doesn't work.
None of it matters.
Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't. Yeah, you got to give everybody has to be in the same place,
Sure.
and then they're like, yeah, sure, it's a cool challenge. Let's go for it.
Hmm. Right.
And so we do.
Right. And
Yeah,
that's how you build great teams and move
yeah,
companies forward and be successful. Yeah. I mean, look, we solved all the problems.
yeah, yeah. The next call, I'll teach you the system that I use, and you'll be like,
Okay.
oh,
And here we go.
here we go. We can do this. Yeah,
Great.
because I didn't want to like when I started off, I wanted a system
Yeah.
because I'm very much a systems thinker,
Hmm.
and I wanted a system, and I couldn't find one, which
Right.
really irritated me no end.
Yeah.
I was like, someone must like, there's got to be a thing out there, right? And so I
Right.
just started building my own,
Hmm.
and then people started asking me like, how are you doing this? What are you
Hmm.
doing? And I for more than 15 years I didn't know how to explain it.
Right.
And then my OT partner, um, now OT partner, uh, interviewed me about what I was doing
Mm.
and was like, I was like, I don't know how to explain it. Like I know the results, but I don't know what I'm doing
Right.
really. And she broke it all down really, really well and said,
Yeah.
you're doing all these things that nobody else does. That's why you're getting results
Mm.
nobody else gets. And I was like, okay, so I need to be able to teach this to other people.
Right.
I need to be able to break it down into like math. And so
Hmm.
that's what we did.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love when
Yeah.
people are able to like identify what the issue is and figure out how to solve it. Not
Yeah.
everyone can do that.
It helps to have somebody who has the language
Hmm.
to 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 pull out the little details,
Yeah.
right? Because I didn't have the language.
Hmm.
Right. I was doing it, but I didn't know how to explain it to anybody because I thought
Right.
I assumed everybody knew what I knew. And it
Sure.
and it turns out they didn't,
Right.
so I was like, oh, okay, well, now how do we teach people that? So
Hmm.
this has been
Awesome.
awesome. We've
That
gone
was
over
so fun.
time.
Yep.
This has been super cool. I'm
Yeah.
totally digging the conversation.
Me too.
Next one we'll do a special episode on power tools and home renovation,
Yeah. DIY and leadership.
DIY and leadership.
Do it.
And I think doing it for your kids, by the way, is huge.
Yeah.
um, my kids actually they took the bad roof off and put the good roof on.
Nice.
Most of the good roof on the tiny house.
Ah, see?
And
And then it's just like they're proud of themselves. You're
oh
proud
yeah,
of them. Ah,
and they were
so
having a
great.
blast. They
Yeah.
were like having so much fun. That was the whole win, right? I'm like,
Totally.
they're having a blast doing it. Nobody got hurt. Everybody came home with all their fingers and toes. And
One thing that was fun, we were doing demo on our cabin and, filling up the truck full of stuff and I was like, we're going to do a dump run. And my daughter was horrified. Like, I
oh,
am not going there. That's disgusting. And I'm like, it's going to be one of the most fun experiences. Like, throw on some gloves. And like the concept of taking things and just chucking them out of the truck is
oh
so
yeah,
therapeutic. And she was like, this is amazing. And I'm like, welcome, welcome.
yeah,
This is
exactly.
this is this is what we do.
This is what we do.
Yeah.
Um, you're talking about therapy.
Yep.
We picked up a skid steer, which is like a small tractor,
Yeah.
right? Put a bunch of different attachments on it. One
Sure.
of the ones that we got is called a brush hog. It's basically a 6 foot wide lawnmower. And
Awesome.
yeah, and
Oh, so satisfying. Like the full line. Oh, yes, that'd be amazing.
I'm not a big fan of it. My better half, though, she loves it.
Yeah.
Like
Headphones in.
she's like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I get to go through all the blackberries and just mow them
Mm,
all down.
yep.
And then I get to go and I get the Scotch brush and I get to chop those down. And I'm like,
Yeah.
awesome. I'm so glad you're happy doing that because
I don't want to do
I
it.
don't want to do that.
Yeah. Hmm.
She's like, it's great. I'm like,
Yes.
I win,
Yes.
like, okay,
Yep.
great. You go do that and I'll
That
do
is
all
what
the
we
other
call
stuff.
a win-win
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah. So it's very cool.
Well,
We're going to
cool.
have some great outtakes at the end of this. It's going to be really fun.
It'll be great.
I'm going to have
I
so much
love
fun editing this. It's going to be a riot.
one of my favorite things is when you're watching like a really intense, like dramatic, sad movie. At the very end, one of the first things I love to say is like, "Where's the blooper reel?" And people are like,
Right.
"What?"
I know. I
This
think
will be the
directors
blooper.
are missing out
I
in
know,
Hollywood. Like, what are they thinking? Like, you need
right?
that at the end, right? Yeah,
Totally. Just a total downer of a movie, and then all the outtakes, like leave on a high
yeah,
note.
yeah, yeah. People laughing and
Right.
yeah,
Total slasher
spilling
movie.
drinks and
Uh-huh.
exactly.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Leave on a high note.
I like that.
No.
Okay, so now I'm going to figure out how to stage stuff to make the bloopers even better.
Yes. Can always hop on another call too and say some outrageous things. I
I bet
was
I'd be
pretty
willing
reserved.
to bet that for the Deadpool movies that Ryan actually wrote
Oh gosh.
stuff just to have a blooper reel.
Either that or like most of that movie is like strangely ad-libbed because they are so
Oh
on
yeah,
another level.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
their level of humor is so next. It's kind of like a Robin Williams situation. Like
yeah,
at a certain point as a director or writer, you're like, it's your movie, bro. Like
yeah.
you let us know
Right.
what this movie is going to be about.
Exactly. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Ryan wrote a bunch of it, but then he also, starred in it. Like
Yeah.
he gets both sides of the table, right?
Yeah. So talented.
Which is just I just find that so to watch and be like, wait, and you own a sports
Mm.
team,
Yeah.
and
And what he has is it gin? He has like a
he sold it.
gin. Oh, he sold
Yeah.
it.
So
So he's just printing his own money at this
he is
point.
yeah he is printing his money in like dumpster loads of it right now.
Yeah. He has
In
like a
like
mobile company, right? Did he
he
sell?
uh he invested in Mint, and then Mint
Okay.
got sold to
Sure. Of course.
one of the big companies. So like
Okay.
he put in $5 and he got back 5,000. That's kind of how that math worked out.
Perfect.
Um, I want to be insider trading wherever he invests
Exactly.
and just follow him. And
Yeah.
like
Should like
okay,
bug his phone or something.
something like that. Him and Nancy Pelosi, like the two of them, like their investment
Oh,
strategies.
gosh.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Total. So have you been watching any of the there is a congressman who's super pissed off about stock trades in Congress
Okay.
because he doesn't do any. Like when he got into Congress, he was like, I'm never doing a stock trade while I'm
I
here.
mean, ethically, that makes sense.
Yeah, totally does, right? Totally makes sense. And he
Right.
was like grilling these other people about the ethics of it. And they were
Yeah.
like, oh my God, we don't want to say a word because we'll sound like we're horrible. Like,
Yep.
and I was like, oh, thank God. I'm
Yeah.
so glad to hear this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, ethically, it's a nightmare.
Uh, this week in particular. Yeah. It's been our
Oh, yeah,
total side note or whatever. Like I mentioned it earlier, but this week, the calls and requests for meetings that we've gotten from employees, managers, founders, whatever, has been gut wrenching. People who are like questioning like the birth rate, like, are you checking IDs again? I was a citizen yet. I don't know if I am like the conversations that are happening, the stress level for people, the uncertainty, the like lack of stability, it is
wow,
chaotic. So it'll be interesting to see how some of this plays out, not just on the political stage, but how it impacts business and leadership.
sure,
And it's such a good opportunity for leaders to step up. And we'll see
yeah,
who does, because we've seen a lot step down recently.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Take care of your people.
Take care of
That's
your
rule
people.
number one.
That's
Yeah,
it.
awesome. This has been a great call. Thank you so
So
much.
fun.
This has
Thank
been super
you.
cool.